So there are two holidays this week. I talked about Tu B'Av, and Tisha B'Av was last Saturday night. As I said, Tu B'Av, for those who came in late, it's the Jewish Valentine's Day. It's today. Hershey's Kisses are waiting for you when you walk out. I went to summer camp for years, and so this week they had a choice of two holidays. Which holiday are they going to commemorate? To be honest with you, of all my years of summer camp, I never heard of Tu B'Av, the Jewish Valentine's Day, and I think I figured out why. The last holiday you want to celebrate at a Jewish camp filled with adolescents, right, is one that encourages them to do more loving, right? They wanted to make sure that we all went home in the same condition that we came to camp. That's what I think they were so we did, but we did heavy Tisha B'Av. And the way we usually observed it was the goal in camp was to create experiential Judaism, memories that you hold on to. And in fact, truth is, some of my most powerful memories of Tisha B'Av are the memories of camp, because they would recall, Tisha B'Av recounts a number of Jewish tragedies, starting with the destruction of the first temple, the second temple, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, the fall of the Warsaw Ghetto walls, things like that. Whether or not they happened exactly on that date is, of course, debatable, but Jewish tradition has blended them into that date. So at camp, we would evoke some memory of some of those events, not just by talking about it, but often sensorily, if you will. So if it was the Holocaust, we'd start the day with bread and water. Certain things were legal when I was at camp that are not done these days. They once corralled us onto the basketball courts surrounded in fences and pretended that it was a concentration camp. We don't do that anymore. But that was done in my day, and of course you don't forget that when it's done to you. Recall the Inquisition with an auto de fe of sorts. The destruction of the temple, we'd actually gather beneath the facsimile of the Western Wall, and somebody up above would throw bricks on us so we could think about the destruction. Those are the kind of things we used to do in camp. They endured. So the message I got from Tisha B'Av at camp was that this was a day of sorrow. This was a day of lamentation. And indeed, that's what it's all about. But years of Jewish study, post-Jewish sleepaway camp, actually brought another message and to me and helped me understand why it still stays on the calendar. We certainly don't need more commemorations of more Jewish days of sorrow. We have plenty, but this has endured because there's another side to this day of commemoration, which is powerful, and it speaks about how the best way to understand the present sometimes is by remembering the past. And so the word that I want to associate in your memories with Tisha B'Av is the word Sinat Chinam. Sinat Chinam means senseless or baseless hatred. And when the rabbis of the Talmud spoke about Tisha B'Av, they spoke about it not only in terms of the cataclysms, but also in terms of this term, Sinat Chinam, this senseless and baseless hatred. And what they said is that the loss of the temple, because in their day they were experiencing the memory of the loss of the first temple, and the rabbis were writing really shortly in Jewish terms, 50, 100, 150 years after the fall of the second temple. And they said that the temple fell, and they turned inward. They said the temple fell not because the Jews didn't keep the mitzvot, but they did as much as any generation. It fell not because the Jews didn't perform good deeds. They did as much as any generation. Not because they didn't study Torah. They certainly did or didn't as much as any generation. But rather it fell because of the level of hate that rose between the Jews because of their disagreements. So when they disagreed with each other, it wasn't just about disagreement. The rabbis were certainly not averse to disagreement. That's what the Talmud is all about. It preserves disagreement. But the Jews in those days didn't just disagree about policy and procedure and ritual and religion. They began to hate each other. And they had a lot to disagree about, some real core issues. Things like the Torah and what the Torah meant to the Jewish people and how to respond to the Romans. Disagreements about the Torah were so deep that ultimately those disagreements determined the future of the Jewish people. There were the Sadducees on one side who said the Torah is it, no additional literature. We're going to practice Judaism exactly as it's written in the Torah, sacrifices and priests and the whole business. And then there were the rabbis, the Pharisees, the rabbis who were creating the Talmud, which became the Judaism that we all know as Judaism, who were saying, no, 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 no. It's not just Torah. It's also this sacred tradition that's come down to us over the generations, and that's the true Judaism. These were core issues. Core issues. The Romans, it wasn't just about whether or not we like this government or another, there were rebels in the midst of the Jews who were willing to shed blood to fight off the Romans because they found Roman rule so onerous. And then there were those who wanted to accommodate the Romans and said the best way to fight Rome is not to fight Rome. It's just let's let Rome exist and we'll endure and we'll be okay. These were core fights, core disagreements. And what the rabbis now looking back hundreds of years later on this said, that's not why Jerusalem fell. It wasn't because the Jews couldn't agree about how to confront the Romans. It was because of the way they hated each other, because of the way that they fought over these issues, which were big issues. Our own behavior led to the cataclysm. And they said it came out, it was Sinat Chinam. That's what it was. Sarah, if you could grab Eddie, he can close that blind, I think. And I see people kind of getting blinded by the settings. You're not appreciating the sunset, I guess. Huh? All right, we'll work on it. Eddie knows how to control the blinds. Thanks, Sarah. The rabbis knew the Jews are going to disagree. 2 Jews, 3 opinions. We all know that, right? It's the way it is with us. That's okay. But when the disagreements rose to the level of ad hominem attacks on other people, of ridicule and derision, the rabbi said that's what tore the Jewish community apart. One commentator, an ancient commentator, said that the way that they disagreed was to challenge each other's virtue. My path is the path of righteousness. Your path is the path of sin. No. My path is the path of righteousness. Your path is the path of sin. Another says, no, that's not what they did. They informed on each other. They would actually turn their opponents over to the Romans or to the rebels, depending upon which side was the side that they associated with. So Jews who were turned over to the Romans, we know what happened to some of them, right? That's what happened to them. They were put on the cross. And Jews who went over to the rebels were often tortured in the way that the rebels did it. So this idea, this notion of Sinat Chinam, the rabbi said, is what led the Jerusalem community to actually tear itself apart. And because they tore themselves apart, they couldn't deal with the challenge of deciding how to go forward with Torah and how to go forward in dealing with the Romans. But here's the truth, and here's why the lesson of Tisha B'Av is so continually relevant. Sinat Chinam, this senseless hatred, never seems too far out of reach of the Jewish people. It seems we're always able to bring it somehow back when we have disagreements. And especially now as we're debating the deal with Iran, the nuclear deal with Iran, the words that are flying back and forth, and the words that people are appropriating and sending in emails back and forth to each other, or web pages that you just have to look at, or television, or wherever it is, are rising to the level of Sinat Chinam. And what we're finding is often, and not always, but often, far from debating this contentious issue, because it is contentious, what's happening is we're tearing ourselves apart. If we're tearing ourselves apart, we're not doing anyone any good, and certainly not the state of Israel or the United States. And I want to be really clear. Perpetrators are on both sides. And no one should hear me speak about any side with any more, that has any more guilt than any other for this. Because the hardest pill to swallow is, if you're involved in this debate, if you're passionate about this debate, as many of us are, then chances are you, like me, have said something or sent something that you probably shouldn't have. You probably should have just let it die in your mailbox. You probably should have. Isaiah Gaffney, who was a scholar and academic of Judaism, was asked about Sinat Chinam because it surfaces all the time in Israel. There's no debate in the Knesset without someone calling someone else a maniac, which has nothing to do with the issue. It's just Sinat Chinam. He said, well, as he joked to the newspaper reporters who were saying, great scholar, Rabbi, Gaffney, can you comment on this? And Gaffney said, well, you know, I don't really know how to comment on it because personally, I'm not plagued with Sinat Chinam. But the people I hate, they really deserve it. How many of us say something like that without his humor? How many of us say, I'm okay, right? I don't do that, but this side, they are the ones who really throw the hate my way. You know, the truth is, really smart people, really sensible, really knowledgeable people disagree about this deal. It's not that one side is ignorant and one side has all the knowledge. The knowledge doesn't rest with any one side. There are diplomats and politicians and analysts in Israel and the US who say that this is the best deal possible and it's the only deal we'll get. There are analysts and politicians and diplomats in the US and Israel who say, no, this is a bad deal and it has to be renegotiated. And again, these are folks who spend their lives studying these issues. And they're on both sides of the situation. But in the heated rhetoric, sometimes we hear people invoking Holocaust imagery as a way of fighting the battle. Historical images that have really nothing to do with the current situation and which in fact undermine the fact that Israel exists. We have a state and a nation and a country with an army. They declare the proponents of this deal to be anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, bent on Israel's destruction. On the other side, people accuse those who are against the deal of being warmongers and neocons and people who want to rush the United States into war, and Israel for that matter. And both sides, of course, accuse the other of somehow or another being ignorant. We see ad campaigns and ominous music which attempt to explain 150-something pages of a deal in 30 seconds. In this city, the LA Federation is facing unbelievable heat because they sent out a letter, an email, opposing the deal. People are starting to withdraw their support of the Federation. Why should Jews in need in Israel and the United States be deprived of support because of opposition or support of a deal that's going down between 6 world powers in Iran and Israel? Rabbis and other institutions who've chosen to remain neutral are being accused of turning their backs on Israel. Rabbis and organizations who oppose the deal are declared ignorant of geopolitics. Rabbis and organizations who support the deal are declared to be traitors to the Jewish people. So we're not immune from this, but we've got to get it under control. We've got to figure out how to lower the volume of the attacks we throw on each other and acknowledge that smart people disagree and that ultimately the shared concern for America's welfare and Israel's welfare is what holds us together. Now, don't get me wrong. We can disagree. We can disagree passionately. We can send well-reasoned articles back and forth to each other. We can work in opposition to each other and use our strategies. We can even debate the issue in public forums. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we can't do is tear ourselves apart like the rabbi said the Jews did in Jerusalem. We can't undermine our communities. We can't destroy what binds us together as Jews. We can't accuse others of treachery. We can't resort to attacks that inflame. We can't presume traitorous motivations. We just can't do it. So what should we do? I found another scholar, a rabbi, who lived in Israel during the time of the British Mandate and died actually in 1935, so a while ago. It's a funny last name for us English speakers, but it's Rav Abraham Isaac Kook, K-O-O-K. He was the first chief rabbi of Israel. And exploring this notion of Sinat Chinam, there's a lot written, a lot of material. And it said that Rav Kook was once walking the streets of Jerusalem. Now, if you've ever been to Jerusalem, you know, the streets are narrow and the windows open over the streets. And as he's walking, some reactionaries actually threw sewage on the rabbi's head. So here back in mandate, pre-state Israel, people said, file charges against you. We know right where they are. File charges. The British said, file charges, we'll arrest them. The Jews said, file charges. Jews shouldn't do that to an esteemed rabbi. And Rav Kook said, I have no interest in court cases. Despite what they did to me, I love them. I'm ready to kiss them. So great is my love, I burn with love for every Jew. Now, what is it that evokes a rabbi, impels a rabbi to say this? He wasn't some naive advocate of love turning the other cheek. He sought to model what he came to call avat chinam. It's the opposite of sinat chinam. Sinat chinam is senseless or baseless hatred. Avat chinam is baseless love. Love without reason. It's a good theme for Tu B'Av. So it's the opposite of sinat chinam. And he said he was going to practice respect and appreciation even for those who opposed him, even though they would stoop to such a reprehensible, disgusting act. Because he said, here's why I'm doing this. He said, if we were destroyed and the world with us due to baseless hatred, due to sinat chinam, then I believe we should rebuild ourselves and the world with us with baseless love, avat chinam. Now, I'm doing my best, folks. And it's not easy to practice avat chinam during these difficult times. But this is the reason that you're not going to get a position from me on this beamer, even though I'm off the beamer right now. You're not going to see a position on my Facebook page. You're not going to see me. Now, don't get me wrong. I have a position. And I've written my letters to my congresspeople, and I've supported the organizations that support the position that I endorse, not the ones you might think, by the way. And I've shared my position with folks on the phone or anyone who's asked. So I'm not afraid to share. I'm just not going to share here. First, it's not a dialogue. And second of all, this isn't the place, I don't believe. And I know what Rabbi Woznicki did 2 weeks ago, and we've had this conversation, he and I and all of us as clergy, and we've had this debate, so he knows this is coming, and I support his right to do what he did. 100%, I want to be really clear. I support his right to do what he did. I'm telling you what, I'm not doing it. So I feel that I can serve our people better by not taking a position. I realize that may leave some of you on both sides unsatisfied. It may be even surprise you, given how outspoken I've been on other issues. But when an issue like this comes up, and when really intelligent people make compelling arguments on both sides, and the potential to split the people is so strong with Sinat Chinam, I think it's more important for me to practice Avat Chinam. And if you got the email from the temple, you know that that was what we advocated officially. So I'm going to do my best. I may slip, and I hope you'll remind me if I do, and I'll do the same to you if you don't mind. Because ultimately, Ahavat Chinam is about what I think we all have to model in a synagogue, because that's what a synagogue is all about. It's about respecting and loving all who walk through the door, and respecting their opinions and their attitudes, and making room for those opinions and those attitudes. It's about being committed to the future of the state of Israel. That's what I believe people on both sides are. And it's about ultimately supporting what is the cornerstone of this country that we've made our homes. That's what democracy needs to be. I know it's not practiced very well sometimes. I know there are many who slip up. But ultimately, we talked about how the Jews can be a light to the nations with the words of our prayers. If we can practice Ahavat Chinam, maybe we have the capacity to shed that light more brightly on any and all who are influenced by our words and our ideas and the thoughts. And ultimately, I extend an invitation to you to join me in the practice of Ahavat Chinam. Ken Yiratzon, so may it be.